Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about the cycle of Venus, because Venus is the planet that rules love and relationships, but don't forget, it also rules our sense of self in terms of what we value. And what we value will really determine our success in life in terms of how much money we make. Our sense of confidence is everything. If you consider Venus rules the planet Taurus and the planet Libra, then you better understand that Taurus, which is the second sign, is so relative to the second house, which deals with money and our childhood experiences. And what I want you to know is, in our childhood experiences, this is where we really are set up to better understand what we value through our family and through our experiences early on. And through that, that's where we gain our sense of confidence as to who we are. And that really does dictate our abilities to be successful, especially in terms of making money. But now let's go to the sign Libra, which Venus rules Libra. And Libra, being the seventh sign of the zodiac, deals with relationships, serious relationships, such as in marriage, because the seventh house is the house of marriage. So what you're going to find when you're looking at Venus, it rules our serious contractual agreements around relationships, which is basically about marriage. Or it can even deal with any type of relationship where there is expectations, agreements, pretty much. So Venus is so important. In Vedic astrology, it's called Sukra, and it represents the wife in a man's chart. So what you're going to find is that wherever Venus is, how it's placed will really reflect many details about a man's wife. But even in a woman's chart, it does deal with relationships, all relationships, but specifically those relationships that come from a committed type situation. So looking at Venus is so important. You see, all the planets represent some aspect of our life. And Venus is so important because it is the need and desire to be in a relationship. And its relevance in a chart tells you so very much. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Venus in terms of how it relates to its cycle, because it's got a fascinating cycle, and that even tells you so much more about this very important and special planet in a chart. I often even say that Venus relates to the heart chakra, because when we look at the chakra system, going from Saturn, the slowest moving planet, up to the fastest moving planet, the moon, you start with the root chakra and you go to the next fastest moving planet, or should I say slowest. So it's Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, and at the heart chakra is Venus, because it deals with love, how we operate and love in our lives, and how much we need love and what type of person we attract based on really who we are. So let's talk about how Venus's cycle operates, because it's so interesting to me. Venus actually is the planet that goes retrograde the least out of all of the planets. In other words, if you take the time that it stays in retrograde motion, it stays there the very least. And that tells you a lot, because it's always moving forward for the most part. Now, Venus will go retrograde about every 18 months. And when it goes retrograde, it stays retrograde for 42 days. They say that the retrograde cycle of Venus has a lot to do with the fasting stage in many religions. Even in Catholicism, they say that Jesus fasted it and went out to the desert for 40 days. And Venus's retrograde cycle is approximately 40 to 42 days. So that's kind of interesting, that correlation. Then the other thing is when it goes retrograde, usually it can stay in the same sign for up to 4 months. That's a long time. But remember, it doesn't go retrograde but once every year and a half. But for example, the last time that it went retrograde on March 29th, 2020, and it went retrograde. When it just went retrograde, that was on May. That was in May. So that was May 13th through June 25th. So June 25th, Venus just went direct, okay? So it went retrograde, though, on May 13th at 27 degrees of Taurus, and then it just went direct at 11 degrees on June 25th. It went direct at 11 degrees of Taurus. Now, if you have any planets on those degrees in Taurus, you would have definitely experienced the experience of Venus retrograde, which is, it can usually bring someone back from the past or just old memories of someone before, old feelings, reminiscing about how it felt to be in love. And generally, you'll get connections from people, like it or not, from the past, or either you will dream about them, think about them. I promise this is the way it works. Now, Venus is still in Taurus as I speak, and it went into Taurus on March 29th, and it will leave Taurus around July 31st or August 1st. Of 2020. So you see, it is in the same sign for 4 months, whereas normally Venus stays in one sign per month, because Venus basically travels along with the sun, because we're looking at the planets Mercury and Venus as they travel with the sun, because they're within the orbit of Earth. The other planets, starting from Mars out, are outside of the orbit of Earth. So these are these planets, when they make their conjunctions to the sun, they'll be called either an inferior conjunction or a superior junction. The inferior conjunction is when Venus conjuncts the sun, and actually this rule goes the same for Mercury because it's within the orbit of Earth. So they make their inferior conjunction when they are aligned within the Earth to the sun. But when they're on the other side of the sun, away from the Earth, this is called the superior conjunction. And what happens during these times, because it's traveling so close to the sun, when it's at its inferior conjunction, it's in its retrograde process. So it conjuncts the sun when it's retrograde. Because remember, when a planet is retrograde, it's closest to the Earth. And on the other side, when Venus makes a conjunction with the sun, a superior conjunction, it's going at a faster speed. It is going direct. It is not retrograde. But what I find so interesting is when Venus or Mercury make their inferior conjunction, they go from an evening star to a morning star. And this has great relevance. I mean, the ancients thought that the planet completely disappeared, which we know it didn't. It just went below the horizon of the sun, and we could only see it in the morning before the sun would rise. But when Venus has its superior conjunction on the outside, not within the orbit, we have Earth, Venus, Sun. It's when Venus is on the outside where Earth is and the Sun on the other side. But you see, this conjunction is where it aligns with the sun and actually the earth. So when it has a superior conjunction, this is when Venus is going direct, and Venus becomes an evening star after that. So Venus will remain as a morning star and evening star for about a year. Let me tell you when Venus will become, when Venus did already become a morning star. So that's why you're not seeing it at night like you did around April. April, it was very bright in the sky and it was about to go retrograde. So you could see that it was like really bright, because remember, when planets go retrograde, they're closest to the Earth. So it was around June 3rd that Venus conjoined with the sun while it was going retrograde. And then it started traveling behind the sun. And that means it was a morning star. Now, when Venus makes its superior conjunction on the outside, this will actually occur March 26th of 2021. And when this happens, after that conjunction, then Venus rides in front of the sun, which in many ancient times, they believed, especially in the Mayan culture, they believed that when Venus became an evening star, where you could see it at night, in other words, they thought that that was war. They thought that was violence, because actually in the Mayan culture, believe it or not, Venus was considered to be the star of war. And that goes back eons. There is a lot that they probably felt like that's what it caused and that's what happened. But we're always looking at Venus as being the feminine principle in dealing with the heart energy, love, dating, you know, all of the romantic things. That's Venus. Venus rules beauty, attraction, anything to do with how we adorn and beautify ourselves, our homes, flowers, anything artistic. It deals with art, beauty, flowers, perfume, makeup, clothing, dealing with fashion. It's a really cool planet. It deals with so many things that we love and makes this world such a happier place to live in. It gives us love, romance. So we all love Venus. But let me just say, here is something very spiritual about Venus. Realize that after Venus has made 5 inferior conjunctions, conjunct the sun within the earth, it takes about 6 years. But if you track its cycle, it makes a 5-pointed star. And I think that's so cool when you look at it, that it forms a pentagram. So this is something that I think is very mystical about Venus, that it has this cycle. And that's very meaningful. But let me talk about if you, in your personal chart, if you were born with Venus as a morning star, or if you were born with Venus as an evening star, that would be when Venus is a morning star, that would be when it is actually transiting in your birth chart behind the sun. So it's like the degrees will be less than the sun. Now, if you were born with Venus as an evening star, this means that Venus is by degree ahead of the sun. So Venus will be a higher degree than the sun. Many times people have Venus conjunct the sun because it never gets that far away from the sun. I think the furthest distance can be about 48 degrees. But let me just say this. When you're looking at this cycle of Venus, please always remember to look and see if you have Venus as a morning star or an evening star, because it has great reference. And let me give you an example. I'll go ahead and give you an example from my chart so that you can better understand how to count it in your chart. So I was born with Venus as an evening star. So in other words, in the night sky, you'll see it. Because my sun is at 22 degrees of Libra and my Venus is 10 degrees of Scorpio. So when you consider Scorpio is after Libra, then I've got Venus in front of the Sun, therefore it's a morning star. If I had Venus in Libra, let's say 2 degrees of Libra, it would be behind the Sun, and that would be a morning star, okay? But I was born with Venus as an evening star, and let me tell you what that means. So if you have Venus as an evening star, it means that you're more conservative, that you will be definitely controlling in a relationship. Therefore, you're not as spontaneous. You've got everything planned and mapped out how things are going to go. You want to be more appealing in society, follow the norm, in other words. But with Venus as an evening star, you need more acceptance. You're more out there. You need for people to accept and appreciate you. But most of all, remember, it's much more controlling and deliberate in its actions, especially around love and relationships. But if you were born with Venus as a morning star, then that means you're going to be a little bit more spontaneous, but probably a lot more fearless, more naive, innocent, and insecure, because you're not quite as controlling and secure as the evening star. So realize that this is going to be someone that's very excitable, enthusiastic about love and relationships, not as serious as the evening star. So this is more, but there's a little bit of insecurity that has to be worked on. So these are the natures of Venus as you see it as a morning star or an evening star. I think Venus is probably one of the most interesting planets when we really look to see love, relationship, our sense of what we value in life, and actually our ability to be successful in terms of finances and money. Just consider that someone with Venus as an evening star is more about being in control of situations, while as the morning star is going to be a little bit more spontaneous. They don't think before they act or before they speak. Completely different energy. So I hope with that you've learned a lot about the cycle of Venus and how to look at Venus in a chart. And remember, even if you're doing Western astrology, which you know I do the Vedic sidereal chart, it's still going to be either behind or in front of the Sun, regardless at what degrees you're looking at. So check that out. I think you'll find it very interesting and you'll have a new appreciation for Venus. So with that, I'd like to close. If you would like more information on me or you would like my free newsletter, go to my website, which is galacticcenter.org. And if you would like to sign up for my new university, we are starting a new semester 1. So come on board and join our community. Go to my university website, which is University of Vedic Astrology.com. Thank you.